Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be back here on the Wamly podcast, Solving the People Puzzle, where on a weekly basis we bring you value around what you can do, how you can think about solving the puzzle around people. And today in studio, I've got an awesome guest, Rose. Rose, thank you so much for being here. It's a great privilege to have you on the conversation. And I'm really excited about the topic. It's one that we've not covered yet. I think it is, at least in my mind, a very important but very misunderstood and sometimes old, sometimes new topic, but we'll get into that. Before we do that, Rose, won't you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Francois. I feel like I pushed myself a little bit into being in your podcast. And the reason for that is because, as you said, the performance conversation to me is a really important one for HR. And, you know, that's a topic that you haven't covered. So it's like, Francois, we must do this. So I'm so happy to be here. In terms of my background, you can tell I have an accent. So I have a Spanish accent. I come from Uruguay, but I have been now in South Africa for about 10 years.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yeah. Long time. So in Uruguay, I have a background in organizational psychology, and then yes, I ventured into working in corporate abroad. And when I came to South Africa, I did a little bit of corporate work, but then soon after, I very much ventured on my own and started working as a freelancer, I would say, and it started to take shape. This was around 2016, where I very much started my own consulting business for HR. And yeah, it's been now a couple of years with a great team backing the whole operation. So that's where we are.
Congratulations. I think what a cool story. We share similar backgrounds in organizational psychology, so it's also fantastic for me to be spending time with a colleague, even though you are from Uruguay, which is fantastic. Welcome to South Africa. It's been 10 years, and well done on making the leap and the jump, going by your own and building a consultancy to help HR, which is exactly what this podcast is about. You know, Solving the People Puzzle is a weekly episode where we bring practical tips, techniques, insight, and guidance to predominantly the HR community, but for business owners and anybody else that is interested. You briefly mentioned our topic, and let me just give you my idea around performance and performance management. So I remember many, many years ago when I started consulting, this was always such an interesting conversation for me because, one, no one was doing it in the same way, even though there's these big methodologies around performance management and how you should be doing it. And then where it was embedded in organizations, I never kind of got the sense that it was done in a way that is dynamic and it's actually being used, as opposed to we have to do it because it's either linked to remuneration or it's a policy. So I'm really keen to understand from your perspective, what are the key aspects for running performance procedures? Would be one of the questions and the topics that we do get into. But maybe as an intro, Rose, just your general high-level understanding, at least now from your perspective around performance management.
Yeah, so I very much identify to what you're saying. When you finish university, you get into your first job, and then, you know, you want to go by the book, or that's what you know. And performance, there's this way that we are taught we need to go about, and we very much want to tick the boxes, and it ends up being a little bit of a tick box exercise. And the reality is that we're not really having the hard conversations, the good conversations to really explore what performance is about, because we are really doing just an exercise. So after having been through some of those experiences, I really had to think for myself, okay, this is not really working out. I'm not getting what I really want to be getting out of these sessions by just following, what we are supposed to be doing, talking about OKRs, KPIs, and doing ratings. The whole rating situation always really brought me such a headache, because I spend more time explaining to people, okay, you're a 3 out of 5, you're okay, but you're not excelling. And then you see these confusion faces and you go like, I'm actually demotivating this person, as opposed to, be really having a real conversation around how this person is doing in this company. So that's where, I very much said, okay, I really need to change this, because I'm not honoring the fact that this should be a real conversation. We're just, doing an exercise that needs to be ticked for HR. So yeah, I then ventured into designing a product that I feel like it really resonates with my clients, and it resonates with, the SME environment in SA. And yeah, if I must say, there are three things that I see work or need to be present in any HR performance procedure for any company. And these insights are brought from us doing performance procedures for a few different clients in a few different industries with a few different kind of staff complement size. And the three things that I feel like need to be there, one of them is very much HR being present in the session. Because sometimes we get caught up with, structuring the sessions, telling managers you need to meet and making it all happen, but not actually part of the session. And the reality is that HR has so much to bring to any session. Even though you don't have the technical background, you do have the people management background. And being that objective observer in those sessions really help for the conversation to put perspective, right? Because all of a sudden, if you have a third party, all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're having this conversation, you're more intentional about it. Even employee and manager, the way they speak about performance, they need to start paraphrasing, what the role is about, how they're going about things, because now they have HR, someone that is out of the, daily operation. And that exercise, which is called meta communication, really helps to put into perspective, what am I bringing into the company? What am I doing? What is my manager thinking? And what is my manager saying in front of somebody else about what my contribution is? So HR being part of the session really, really helps. And more so when
HR needs to be involved.
Very much. More so when you have experienced HR people that are not, they're not shy away from the difficult conversation. So what I like to do in my sessions is that I take on cues, facial cues, physical cues. If I see an employee, and I had it, like literally doing this in a session, like going like this. Sorry, I'm just reclining in the seat, like feeling like, crossing my hands. And, that means that, let's unpack that. Employee, can I just ask you what happened there? Is there something that you're not, resonating with? So doing that really helps to have that conversation. Yeah. Should I continue?
I think, firstly, when we look at... No, I'd love to reflect. Thanks, Rose. And then we're going to continue, of course. I think for the audience who... Maybe we should have started with this, but that's okay. It's a fluid conversation. For the audience out there who does not necessarily use or know about performance management, let's just quickly, because I'm going to circle that back to this aspect you just mentioned. So performance management is this practice or this idea that, we measuring individuals, literally their performance, to understand if they're in flow, if they are doing what they've been rewarded for, and if ultimately the organization is moving forward. And now what I love about that first point around HR being involved is it's creating a sense of this is about us and not just about a specific pocket or a specific manager or a specific environment. But ultimately, when more stakeholders are involved and take ownership for at least the session being facilitated, whatever, the decision is around how you do that is, there's this idea of, well, it's moving the business forward. So the intent already is more positive for me, it feels.
Yeah, big time. I feel like employees, there might be some sort of reservation at the beginning, but I think that when they see HR there, they see how the conversation flows with HR, they really appreciate it because they feel heard. Like there's a time where they actually, people are asking them, I want to hear from you. And they really appreciate that. And at the same time, can also work for managers because sometimes, especially younger managers, they don't know yet how to perform that role and manage an employee. So HR can really help to say, what are you feeling and how would you go about this? What's your final say on how we see this? And that really empowers the manager and gives that voice of like more kind of like how we should go about this type of thing. So it really does help. Yeah.
Okay. We touched briefly on this, Rose. At Wamly, we have OKRs. Okay, so that's our system that we've picked. And there are many methodologies out there, KPIs, objectives, tasks, OKRs. But a lot of them don't work. And in your opinion and in your experience, what are companies actually getting wrong, leading into some of these systems actually not having an effect and a positive outcome on giving the business owner the metrics required to do whatever is needed after these sessions?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it's one that really kept me, gave me sleepless nights. Because I feel like we get too focused and obsessed on like, how do I identify? What exactly the role entails? And, you're 70% there on this. And how do we measure? What system do we use? What piece of software will help us with us? And the reality is that, yes, I agree that we need a North Star and that we need some sort of like, okay, let's, break it down per team and per time component, quarterly, monthly. That's good for guidance. Now, how we use that for performance measurement, that's where I'm like, we can really get very focused on the detail without seeing what is that we're trying to really get out of a performance procedure. So I suppose it's great to speak about OKRs and to have a conversation around how we're doing and how, aligned we are, manager and employee. But the system that to me has worked the most to really have a conversation where a manager and an employee align on what needs to happen, it's pulsing as opposed to OKR. So the difference that I see between OKRs and KPIs and pulsing employees is that OKRs and KPIs are very much stated and comes from the company, right? Management, executive teams saying, okay, this is what we need to be doing. Pulsing is, the concept is that it's bottom up. You're asking the employee in retrospective, what was your highlight of the past week? So now I'm kind of creating this narrative of like, you tell me what you're doing for me on a weekly basis, which is extremely empowering and creates that accountability that, okay, actually I want to hear from you, what is that you're doing? And then what I do in my quarterly sessions is we bring all the highlights the person, is bringing to the conversation, and I have the manager giving feedback around the highlights the person is bringing. So it's very much saying, Francois, this is everything that I did for the company during the past quarter. And then you start telling me, okay, this was great. This is how we took forward this project. And look here, I feel like, and you give advice. So it's such a different concept to say, you employee, tell me what is that you've been working on, as opposed to, okay, you were supposed to, make a monthly report and then you're a 3 on that, you did well, you did it on time. It's like, I don't want the conversation to be if I did it on time or not. I want to be about that was a project that, we managed to get the client through, or, more insightful conversation.
I love that. Let me repeat and kind of try and understand what you said, and you can help me if I got it right or wrong. So what you're saying is, where organizations get it wrong at times is when a methodology is picked, managers top down then implement the OKRs, KPIs, objectives, whatever you want to call it, and the employee receives that. And that then should govern and determine their way of work. What you're saying is there is an opportunity to turn this around. And through something like pulsing, you are asking the employee, looking backwards, the last week, the last month, the last quarter, what did you do for the business? And as the employee is highlighting this and sharing what they've been doing, the manager then has the opportunity to reflect on that and then understand, did what you were doing take the company forward? Did it contribute to the bottom line? Did it make you or enable you to reach your targets and your goals? And ultimately, are they then therefore happy with your performance or not? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's exactly. And what we find is that with the recollection of these highlights, there's that concept of journaling and also storytelling, like we're building this together. And this is how far we've come from all this. People go like, wow, I can't believe I have forgotten that had happened and things like that through this exercise. And so I do believe that some sort of guideline, like job description around this is what you should be doing, because we're not going to tell the employee, okay, tell me what you do and just leave it at that. Some guideline it's good. We kind of know what the role entails. So I wouldn't necessarily do it just for a new employee doing a probation, right? That's a little bit too unstructured. But when we have someone that we want to retain, right? That we don't want to have that level of conversation that's just like, okay, you've done it, then we want to retain this person. We see the value and we want to encourage them to continue growing in the company. We see a lot of the creativity of this person coming through when we just ask them, what was the highlight of your week? because now they're bringing things that they're passionate about and, things that they find distinctive on this particular week. So we very much create the narrative around, okay, how do we continue taking this forward? And of course, I like to also include in the conversation, okay, what's the long-term focus and what's the next quarter focus? So then there's, again, that kind of North Star telling us where is that we're going together as a team. And so, yeah.
I'm so glad you mentioned that again, because for the audience out there, one of the things going through my mind as Rose is speaking is, because I'm thinking of my own employees, I'm going, okay, well, what if the highlights and what you are doing is completely irrelevant and not in line with what we require as a business? You might be having a ball of a time, enjoying your job, being super excited about your activities. And then at the end of the week, as the manager, I go, why on earth are you doing that? So, okay, then I heard you say 3 things, and I want to highlight them for the audience again. 1, there should be some sort of guideline, like a job description as an example. Okay, and preferably we're not going to do this during onboarding when someone is still getting used to the environment, the culture, and their expectations in the job. Second to that, there is also an opportunity to then reflect from the manager back on what I've been saying and bring that back to the North Star around, okay, that is what you did. What was the expectation? Is the expectation clear? In other words, do I have job clarity? And then from there, how do we then focus? I think you used the word focus, our attention towards this North Star. So what does the next month look like? What does the next quarter look like? And I think that's so powerful, because as long as we understand the bigger boundary around where we are going, yourself, myself, the manager, the team, etc., in there, I love what you're saying around the freedom, the creativity, the responsibility, the ownership, and then the joy of being able to look back and go, geez, I've grown. I've come a long way, as opposed to a session where I sit and I get these points system, which very often leave people feeling not good enough. And there's not always linked in. And I think that's where I want to take the next part of the conversation, Rose, is now what now? Because I'm always quite aware of performance management not always being linked to development opportunities. So from a resource perspective, the business needing to help this individual now, how do you see that playing into this way of thinking of yours?
Yeah. Before I answer that question, I just wanted to say to what you were mentioning before, we also add with the highlights what we call sentiment tagging. So we ask the manager, was the highlight well executed? Was the highlight, did it exceed the expectations? Did it create a new standard? Some development is needed, or it wasn't well executed. So that really helps with that alignment exercise. And it has happened to me where I'm in conversations where the highlights are completely not aligned, there's such the people are coming from 2 different worlds almost. And I take those conversations very seriously when I say, I see misalignment. And that conversation can be around, we need to find alignment and try find those bridges. Or I take the conversation to disciplinary measures, right? I'll start a counseling session for be it underperformance or conduct. So it does really help. It's a platform, and it's a very to promote good work environment and to be proactive around finding areas of development. The moment I see that this tool is showing me something else, I will act, and kickstart a different process if needed. So yeah, maybe that also links to the point that you were trying to go to in terms of development. So that's the one thing. I am always focused in my sessions to try find alignment. If I find alignment, then I know, okay, the person is on track. We have plans in place. We have long-term focus, short-term focus. And what I like doing is very much the reporting after the pulsing exercise took place. So what I find is that for anything that HR does to create that accountability for how we very much engage with our employees and with our staff complement, we always need to give information back, because you can't expect employees to open up their hearts and their minds and do insightful retrospective exercises, and then you're not giving them back anything. So they do take the good conversation out of it, but then what I like to do is I graph out in my pulsing, I ask them about their stress levels, energy levels, and then I graph out their quarterly input. And then we go through the information to say, Okay, these are your energy levels and these are your stress levels. So I always like to bring back whatever it is that they have completed as a means to say, we are in this together, and this is what you're showing me how you're doing, and we're kind of digesting it together. So that's for the employee. Then we also do reporting for the manager to say, cool, we touch base with the whole team, your whole team. Now, I like the 9-box metrics tool. I don't know if you're familiarized with it. It's very much a career mapping tool.
Yes.
Where we map out the employees. So that reporting really helps for the manager to say, cool, it's an objective measure that we have now that we can grab onto when we need to promote employees, if we need to do any lateral move, meaning someone wants to explore a different area in the business, then there's this tool that they can use for developing staff members. And then there's the executive team. We also do reporting for them, and that's the way I like to do reporting for executives is very much a report that can be shown to a board, because that's how you make it easy. It's not what I want to say, but it's so nice for them to say, this is how HR is accountable for their function, and I can show my board how people development and my people initiatives are going. So that's the other part of the reporting, and how I think HR becomes strategic to the business.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's, ultimately one of the things that I've also struggled to see during the years is what happens with the data. And I'm loving that you're bringing the conversation up around reporting, because ultimately that's insight. And if you go back to the methodology around performance and performance measurement, it's to help the business and the board and the exco understand why are we not going forward. Because ultimately that then boils down to a group and an individual level of performance. So that's fantastic. Rose, I would love for you to share some advice for employees listening to the podcast around what they can do from a performance perspective to better themselves or to be confident in a session. Because the reality is most of the organizations do have performance management cycles. There is that conversation. What are some practical tips that we can share with the audience around how to show up in that session?
Yeah, so something that I like to do for my sessions is that I link the file we're going to digest in between an employee and a manager to the calendar invite, right? So, and I do that intentionally a few days before the meeting takes place. And the reason why I do that is because I want the employee to be able to see all the information that we're going to discuss and prepare for the session. I feel like we shouldn't be seeing performance as an employee's put in the spotlight, like, okay, we're talking about me, but I kind of have nothing to say. You tell me, right? So by doing that, I let the employee prepared, and you show up differently. It's like, I want to talk about my performance. I saw what we're going to digest, and this is what I have to say about it. So with that comes the attitude of I want employees to actually run my session, because that's how you show me that you're motivated, that you're really invested in this process, and that you want to grow, right? So that change in mindset, right? Because, maybe the first cycle, they still come with that mindset of like, okay, this is how the procedure goes. But then when they see how it goes, then you start seeing how they start showing up, their individuality, right, to the session. And I love to see that, because then the real conversations happen. And something that I really like to do, and I always bring it as a little exercise in my performance sessions, is that, standard employment in any company, you have a remuneration package for a month of work, right? That's usually how it goes. And sometimes what happens with that mindset is that you underperform, you had an okay month, you kind of did the almost for the company, your CTC is the same at the end of the month. And there's some sort of psychology there as to like, okay, but then if I can, and I'm not saying employees always tend to do less, because we have top talented and, high pro individuals that perform very well. But that link, it's still in human nature to link it, to say whatever I do, at the end of the day is that.
Yes.
So the exercise that I like to do is to say, what's your CTC? Let's say it's disclosed to a manager as well. Divide that by 21.67. That's your hourly rate. Did you know you had an hourly rate? Mostly they will say no. Okay, this is your hourly rate. I tell them in the session. And then we go, know that every hour of your day that you work, that's much money how the business is valuing your work for. So doing that equation, so for them to think as an independent contractor or even as a business that sells hours, change the conversation to be like, this is how much value the business is, putting on you to add to the business back,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that's a wonderful conversation to have, because it's very empowering. It's very thinking forward in terms of like how the gig economy works, where we sell hours for our time. And then it allows to speak about productivity and really, sell yourself more and kind of how you're showing up for your work, really.
Yeah, that's a very refreshing way to think about it. At Wamly, when we help our organizations calculate ROI, we often go back to an hourly and a daily fee to understand value. The only reason I'm bringing that up is because it's an indirect cost that employees don't necessarily always think about. Sometimes businesses also, but definitely on the employee side, what am I worth in your eyes, and therefore, what is the value I'm putting back into that? Rose, I want to land the plane. Thank you so much. This has been such an insightful conversation around thinking differently from a performance measurement perspective. I know that the audience out there found as much value as I did, specifically with this topic being such a highly debated one. I a couple of months ago spoke to a big business in South Africa who said they've completely discarded performance management and they're back to coffee chats. And then someone else told me, no, we're still running strict cycles once a month. And I asked, is it adding value? And they said, we don't know. We're not entirely sure, but we have to do them. So I think this podcast really is just bringing back the why. Why are we doing this? If you're not intentional about it, maybe you should reconsider it entirely and rather drop it until you've figured something out that does work for you and is contextual, so that individuals, groups, teams, exco, and board members actually get the value that it is supposed to give the business.
Yeah, 100%. I love the way you put it out. And performance is very much for HR, the heart of the operation. We can acquire team members, and then the way we have to retain them in this employee journey is through the performance cycles, right? So as a company, one really needs to think how, align with your culture, how you want to go about it. And for me, it has always been around unveiling those real conversations and not just having it as a tick box exercise, because that's really killing the soul out of it, really.
Yes. Well, Rose, thank you for your time. Good luck with your consultancy and your journey here in South Africa. It would be great to meet you in person. And thank you for being on the podcast, sharing your insights, sharing your wisdom, sharing your knowledge, real practical tips for the audience. And it's been great having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Francois.